Was a king really murdered in his own castle? Did a queen orchestrate a bloody coup? And could a young boy, barely out of his teens, seize absolute power amidst a kingdom crumbling into chaos? The air in Nottingham Castle hung thick with the scent of damp stone and unspoken dread. November 1330. A chill deeper than the autumn wind snaked through the ancient walls, carrying with it the whispers of betrayal and the metallic tang of impending violence. Outside, the rain hammered against the battlements, mirroring the storm brewing within the castle's heart. A royal coup was about to unfold, a desperate gamble fueled by simmering resentment and the terrifying realization that England was drowning in a sea of corruption. The scene was meticulously orchestrated, a deadly ballet performed in the shadows. William Montagu, a knight hardened by recent skirmishes in France and a loyal friend to the young king, Edward III, was the conductor of this dangerous symphony. He'd returned from a tense mission to Rome, carrying secret messages for Pope John XXII, and brought with him a chilling awareness: Edward's life was in mortal peril. He'd confided in the king, his words echoing in the echoing corridors: "It is better to eat dog than to be eaten by the dog." Edward, a boy of 17, a king burdened by a legacy of scandal and surrounded by vultures, understood the brutal logic. The tunnel, a forgotten artery beneath the castle, was their lifeline. A postern gate, carelessly left ajar by a disgruntled watchman, Eland, provided an illicit passage to the heart of the royal quarters. Eland, a speculator, essentially a castle guard, had traded his duty for a desperate chance at freedom, guiding Montagu and his band of loyalists through the labyrinthine passages. The air grew colder, the silence more profound, punctuated only by the rhythmic drip of water and the measured tread of their boots. Meanwhile, within the opulent halls of Nottingham Castle, Queen Isabella and her coterie were engaged in a tense game of power. Roger Mortimer, the Earl of March, her lover and effectively the king's regent, was holding court, discussing strategies for crushing the burgeoning rebellion. He was a man sculpted from granite and ambition, a ruthless operator who had clawed his way to influence through a combination of shrewd political maneuvering and sheer force of will. His sons, Geoffrey and Edmund, flanked him, radiating an aura of cold calculation. Simon Barrowford, Sir Hugh Turpington, and Henry Burgersh, a bishop with a disconcerting lack of religious restraint, completed the circle of power. They were a formidable assembly, united by loyalty to Mortimer and a shared disdain for the young king. Suddenly, a shattering crash echoed through the hall. John Neville, a household knight, burst through the doorway, his sword flashing in the torchlight. The carefully constructed facade of royal security crumbled, chaos erupted. The conspirators, a ragged band of 20 or more, charged into the hall, cutting down guards with brutal efficiency. Montagu, a whirlwind of steel and fury, dispatched Turpington, the steward, with a single decisive blow. The air filled with the screams of the dying and the clang of steel. Edward, a boy barely a man, had been roused from his slumber. He'd orchestrated the entire operation, a daring gamble that could either secure his throne or lead to his swift and brutal demise. He'd been kept largely isolated, coddled by his mother and controlled by Mortimer, a prisoner in his own kingdom. Now he seized his opportunity, unleashing a torrent of youthful energy and determination, but the castle was a viper's nest. Mortimer, sensing the imminent danger, reacted with chilling speed. He fled, seeking refuge in his chambers, but it was too late. Montagu and his men cornered him, capturing him and his advisors. The Earl of March, a man who had wielded power with ruthless efficiency, was now a captive, facing a trial that would determine his fate. The trial was a grotesque spectacle. Mortimer was dragged before a hastily convened parliament, a gathering of the kingdom's most powerful nobles. He was bound, gagged, and humiliated, a symbol of the corruption and tyranny that had gripped England for so long. The charges were a litany of grievances: treason, usurpation, conspiracy, and the most damning of all, the orchestration of Edward II's murder. The official record declared that Mortimer had usurped by himself royal power and the government of the realm concerning the estate of the king, and that he had ordained that the old king be sent to Berkeley Castle, where he was traitorously, feloniously, and falsely murdered and killed by him and his followers. The atmosphere in Westminster Hall was electric. The nobles, a collection of ambitious and wary men, debated the merits of the charges, their faces etched with suspicion and intrigue. The young king, Edward III, watched intently, his youthful face betraying a mixture of determination and apprehension. He had gambled everything on this moment, and the outcome would determine the future of England. The verdict was swift and merciless. Mortimer was found guilty on all counts. He was sentenced to be drawn and hanged, a brutal and agonizing form of execution. As he was led to the scaffold, his eyes burned with defiance. His sons, Geoffrey and Edmund, were also condemned to imprisonment and disgrace. Simon Barrowford and Sir Hugh Turpington faced similar fates. Even Henry Burghersh the bishop was not spared, condemned to a humiliating exile, but the drama wasn't over. Rumors began to circulate, whispers of a ghostly return. Edward II, the murdered king, was said to be alive, wandering the Italian countryside as a hermit. The story, initially dismissed as a fanciful tale, gained momentum, fueled by the uncertainty and the lingering trauma of the coup. The idea of the dead king returning to reclaim his throne was a terrifying prospect, a symbol of the chaos and instability that threatened to engulf the kingdom. As Edward III prepared to ascend the throne, he faced a daunting array of challenges. England was a kingdom ravaged by war, burdened by debt, and teetering on the brink of civil war. The disastrous policies of his father had left the treasury depleted, the military weakened, and the realm divided. The young king's mother, Isabella, was a formidable obstacle, determined to maintain her influence and protect her own interests. The coup at Nottingham Castle was merely the first act in a long and bloody drama. Henry, Earl of Lancaster, a cousin of Edward II and a staunch opponent of Mortimer, rose to prominence, leading a rebellion against the new regime. The kingdom fractured once more, plunging into a renewed period of conflict. Mortimer, emboldened by Isabella's support, continued to amass power, consolidating his control over Wales and the Northern Marches. He even adopted a theatrical persona, presiding over tournaments as King Arthur, a blatant assertion of his authority and a symbol of his Welsh heritage. The situation deteriorated rapidly. England suffered humiliating defeats in both war and diplomacy. The crown's finances were in a state of near collapse, exacerbated by Mortimer's reckless spending and his attempts to plunder royal funds. The judicial commissions established to deal with widespread banditry and lawlessness proved ineffective, collapsing under the weight of corruption and inefficiency. Edward III, trapped between his mother's machinations and his enemies' ambitions, found himself increasingly isolated and vulnerable. Yet amidst the chaos and uncertainty, a new generation of nobles emerged, eager to seize power and restore order. Edward III, a young man of remarkable courage and determination, began to plot his own counter-offensive. He recognized that he needed to consolidate his authority, to eliminate his enemies, and to secure the loyalty of his subjects. The climax arrived in Winchester, where Mortimer launched a desperate attack on the Earl of Kent, a key ally of the young king. Kent was arrested for treason, accused of plotting to contact Edward II at Corfe Castle, and swiftly condemned to death. His head was hacked off by a lowly prisoner in a gruesome display of savagery, a chilling reminder of the ruthlessness of Mortimer's regime. As Edward III prepared to leave Winchester, he was haunted by the memory of his father's murder and the legacy of corruption and tyranny that had plagued his reign. He was determined to build a new England, a kingdom founded on justice, stability, and strength. The young king's reign would be defined by ambition, warfare, and a relentless pursuit of glory. He would embark on a series of military campaigns that would transform England into a major European power. He would forge alliances with France and Scotland, and he would lay the foundations for a dynasty that would rule England for centuries to come. But the seeds of future conflict were already sown. The rivalry between Edward III and Mortimer would continue to simmer beneath the surface, threatening to erupt into open warfare. The ambitions of Isabella and her sons would remain a constant source of instability. And the ghosts of Edward II would continue to haunt the corridors of power, a reminder of the dark secrets and betrayals that lay hidden beneath the glittering facade of the Plantagenet court. Edward III's ascent to the throne was not a fairy tale. It was a brutal, bloody transaction, a desperate act of survival in a kingdom drowning in treachery. He inherited a kingdom on the brink of collapse, burdened by debt, plagued by corruption, and divided by factionalism. But he also inherited a legacy of courage, ambition, and a fierce determination to restore England to its former glory. As Edward III looked out over his realm, he knew that the road ahead would be long and arduous. But he was prepared to face any challenge, armed with his youthful energy, his unwavering loyalty to his subjects, and a burning desire to forge a new destiny for England. And so, as the sun rose over a kingdom still reeling from the events of the previous months, Edward III, the young king, began to write his own chapter in the annals of English history, an age of glory, marked by both triumph and tragedy. But did Edward III truly escape the shadow of his father's fate, or was he simply destined to repeat the cycle of violence and betrayal that had haunted the Plantagenet dynasty for so long?